In the past, the they used to sell weapons in the past, in the days of yesteryear, 2015, 2014. They would sell mantises, they would sell the panthers and all that stuff, right? And then one day they decided that they were going to take all the weapons off the store, and anyone that had them in their hangars had them removed, and their accounts attributed with store credit. So to see this come back is is annoying, right? So it's one of those things that you've lived long enough to see yourself become the villain kind of thing, right? Here's the thing, right? If this is what they're going to do, then they need to do it for all the ships that have bespoke weapons, right? And I don't think I need to list all those off. The obvious standout is the Glaive and the Meteor, right? But if they're going to do that, then they might as well go ahead and put the weapons back on the storefront, right? All of them, right? But the problem with that is that if they put all the weapons back on the storefront, then they're going to have to be balanced, and they're going to have to work, right? There's nothing more annoying than seeing two new sets of ballistic weapons, one for the Wolf, one for the Shiv, come out. And of course, the Shiv being the Breaknet size 4 being the only weapon that has convergence with energy weapons. All the other existing ballistics in the game have very poor, if not any, convergence with energy weapons. And that shit is annoying. So if you pay attention to this stuff, right, then you would realize that in order to get pip convergence on a mixed loadout, so that you can balance out your power plants, you're going to have to pay for the new Shiv that comes with the guns. I mean, because let's be honest, most people didn't buy the Shiv because they wanted it. They bought the Shiv because it came with new guns. And when those guns don't perform anymore, then the Shivs across the galaxy will either be melted or they will be upgraded into something else. So they need to shift something here, right? This is why they call it a pyramid scheme. And let me explain to you why it's called a pyramid scheme, all right? So you have the first layer of development, which is the yesteryear stuff, right? All these older size 2 and size 3 weapons, right? And then as time goes on, you layer on new developed things on top of the old developed things that invalidate the old things that were made, right? And it doesn't force you, but it highly encourages you to have to spend money to either air quotes stay relevant, stay competitive, or be able to play the game optimally, right? Because as you pointed out in the past with the tractor beams, Khaleesi, they nerfed the shit out of the fucking handheld tractor beams to sell those goddamn atlases. And there are countless examples of this through the years. I've called out the blatant, nerfing and neutering of the Glaive in order to sell the F7A or to encourage the sale of the Mark II Super Hornet or whatever, right? And then, the same thing with the Lightning. It comes out, they encourage it by making it, one of the best ships in the game to play, right? Not obviously the best, but it was defeatable back then, but still it wasn't as bad as it is today. And now that they've nerfed that and, brought out the Stinger, right? Now you see the clear difference, right? The F8C, the Lightning, has all the older hard points, right? Size 2 and size 3. It's a older Mark 1 master blueprint, right? Same thing with the Glaive. Now these newer ones have come out, right? And some ships needed a new master blueprint in order to bring it online. Some of the older ones had enough stuff there to copy paste over essentially. But where we're at right now is a company that's monetizing the neutering of older things in order to sell newer things. And what makes this whole thing so triggering with the weapons, like the flight blades, people, chimped out about that because at the end of the day, they don't want to see a Hornet be able to turn on a light fighter, and that's the god honest fucking truth. All right, it has nothing to do with FOMO. It has nothing to do with sales. It has nothing to do with any of that. It just has everything to do with enabling these bigger ships to be competitive with the lighter ships at a cost, right? But right now, the only thing we see is that for the light fighters. And since they couldn't sell that, right, they, essentially took that one thing that all of you, raised your pitchforks for, right, and then they integrated it into the upgrade, if you will, for the L-22. The Wolf was always a bad ship. And the only reason why I'm flying it now is because Zal is twisting my goddamn arm to fly these fucking ships. I hate them. Alright? I despise them. Okay? The Gladius is a special snowflake in all of this because the Gladius is a Squadron 42 ship. Therefore, it takes priority over everything else. Therefore, it has feature sets and it has mechanics that, quite frankly, make the other light fighters have a disadvantage in some capacity. So in order to mask that reality, they rebuff the arrows so they can compete, right? And then they bring out this fucking Wolf, which is supposed to be able to kill an arrow, right? And now that people bitched about what's it called? The fin, right? Which is a cause, we all know how CIG hates it when you offend them or criticize them about their artwork. Oh my fucking god, right? It seems to get the quickest response out of CR is just saying how bad some artwork is that he approved. Yeah, So, and then of course, then there's the ballistic situation again, right? CIG can't get through their fucking skulls to give more ammo count / magazine capacity like we had in the yesteryear days, right? Back in the day, ballistics had mags. It was what was loaded, and then you had the extra additional ammo box, okay, which gave you 2 effective magazines at full ammo capacity. So imagine a Mantis with double ammo. Imagine anything from yesteryear, just ×2 it, and that's what it used to be. And ever since they removed ammo crates from the dogfighters or from ships, now we have single mag fucking ballistics, which are useless in any fucking engagement whatsoever. Unless it's a 1v1, right? Again, an age of the game where every ship was designed to go nose to nose. And now here we are in this age of the game where the only thing that can go nose to nose are light fighters or anything in its class, right? Any type of mixed, like a heavy will never be able to go nose to nose with a light fighter, okay? I mean, fucking duh, it's a heavy fighter. But when we're talking about medium fighters and you still can't go nose to nose with lights, you got a problem. You just got a problem, all right? So, all that being said, you have a situation where they bring out these newer ballistics, right? And they have higher magazine count than all the other ballistics. And not only that, they have better alpha, better rate of fire, and then of course, like I cannot stress enough, fucking pip convergence. Right? Pip convergence on a mixed loadout is better than fucking platinum, boys. Alright? And you know what? CIG has monetized that too. But, again, this is something that, most people don't, notice unless they're playing at this level, right? So, but when it comes to everything else, you can clearly see where CIG is buffing and nerfing things based on the financial wins of the design that they're going for nowadays. Regardless if we agree or disagree with it, right? There are in fact certain things that they will not listen to, right? That they will disregard your feedback if it goes against what Chris wants, if it goes against what Sandy wants over there at marketing, if anything that they don't like, but if we give feedback that affects their financials by, saying, hey, I'm not buying this shit-ass fucking light fighter because, one, fuck all of you in the vehicle team for allowing this toxic meta to persist for so goddamn long, and number 2, magazine count, right? You have a dogfighter that's good for it blows its load for 5 fucking minutes, and it's done. Like, you're never gonna please a woman with that ship. But when you have the fucking L-22 that can go all night long, then yeah, there you go. So it's like, I hate to use that analogy, but but that's the truth when it comes to ballistics and dogfighters. They blow their loads and then they're done, right? They roll over and fall asleep because now you have to keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to get ammo to keep in a fight, which is unrealistic by any stretch of the imagination. So, that all being said, either they need to put all weapons back in the store and balance them properly, or they need to take this shit off the fucking store immediately. Because, having, this stuff is still in my buyback tab, right? It doesn't, what I'm saying? Like, people are going to put this in their buyback tabs immediately, right? So, I don't understand why these things need to be sitting unused in the buyback tab, right? If they're just going to be put in game. So there needs to be a reasonable decision process here when it comes to this, right? If people are going to dupe as much as they are, then why not put the weapons back in the store so CIG can make money off of it, right? Honestly. And to be completely honest with you, Khaleesi, it's like I've always advocated for customization of ships on the store. And let me give you an example of that. I know I sound like a broken record, and I keep going on and on and on about this. I'm sorry if I'm annoying all of you guys. I really am. But there's something that y'all just need to understand about the thought process here when it comes to this nonsense, right? It's not really something new, okay? As you can see, this is a 300 series, right? And this is a customized button. And this is a button that needs to be on every single goddamn ship in the game. Every single goddamn ship in the game needs to have this customized button, right? And, it pulls up this nice little flash screen or whatever, right? You can choose from all the available paint jobs that are for this fucking ship, right? Clearly this is a template that has been sitting on the storefront for a decade, not being used, not being applied to every other ship in the game. And there are so many things, like the cosmetics are one thing, all right? We can talk about the cosmetics all day long, and the hex codes and all that shit all day long, but when it comes to like things like the trim and stuff, like this is the stuff that people are really wanting. This is the customization that people want, right? Having a sport or a standard steering wheel, right? It's like having a bucket seat. I prefer a bucket seat in real life too. It should matter in Star Citizen as well, right? If but that's just me. Maybe I'm being too realistic there. And then of course, like you have all this stuff, cosmetics, right? But here's the part I want to get to, right? This is where you can choose what kind of weapons and configure or components it comes with, right? And you can read through it yourself, but I'll click on the one that's relevant to me, right? Which is this one. What does it come with? It comes with the missiles are not really important. The distortions are important. The size 1 force walls, these are military class B components, right? And if you sit here and finagle the store correctly, then you can have LTI fucking military components, right? Zero rushes are decent. These are competition B coolers, right? Class B military power plant, right? This is stuff you can get out of the box, right? And here's another configuration, right? This one comes with polars, which are, Class B military, I believe. But anyway, there you go, right? There's always been a path to owning weapons and owning components in this game. And then, of course, using LTI tokens and then making these components forever on your account. Which, at the end of the day, is the name of the game at this point, right? I find that there's more value in the components that some of these ships come with nowadays than the actual chassis themselves. Especially when it comes to the Buccaneer, right? The Buccaneer comes stock with a JS300 Class A power plant. That's the only thing in my mind that gives the Buccaneer value. And I don't want to talk about the other, flight stuff and what other people use, okay? That's them, all right? It's just my opinion. But, if all this stuff is here, right? Then why are we being selective about it, right? You know, if CIG really wants to maximize their profits on every single ship sale they ever do, then all they would have to do is bring that system back and apply it to every ship in the game, thus giving not just more value and personalization options to the ships that people buy out of the box, right? But it also gives, people the ability to pick and choose what weapons and components they own on that chassis, right? And at the end of the day, if people sit here and min-max that, right, then they're just going to have a ship that has a ridiculously high insurance claimer when it comes to, claiming your ship after it gets destroyed. So not only would it be a money sink in game, right, to keep people playing the game and interacting with the game, but it's also a way for CIG to at least, maximize another, 30 or 40 bucks at max, or depending on what it is, right? Maybe $50, right, on each individual sale of each ship in the game, right? Because like if you start adding up the math, right? The Gladius is $90. You put a paint job on it, that's another $7 or $8. That automatically makes the ship $98, right? And then you give the loadout options with components, that'll be another $10-12, like you saw with the 325A, which will boost the Gladius's sale up to around $110 to $115. And you can do that with every single ship in the fucking game, right? So, and then of course there should be a way for people that already own these ships, right? Let's say they want to own more about them, right? Like you have a window that pops up on the website, and you can buy everything on the customization page on the website, right? And that way it shows up in your hangar when you launch the game. So, why not have the option to buy all the weapons packs or all the paints for every ship in the game that you own, right? And again, that if CIG wants to maximize their sales, they could easily do that. And I'm not sitting here saying that this is some big brain genius level stuff. No, I've been around long enough to tell you, son, that this shit was talked about well before any of y'all's time, especially at VerseCon 2017, after they made the decision to remove weapons from the store and give everyone store credit. Not everyone agreed with that. CIG just does what the fuck they want sometimes. So, when you're giving feedback on, how they do business, they're not going to be super appreciative of that, right? They're sometimes they think you're coming off as being a know-it-all or trying to be better than them or whatever. So no, there's a degree of common sense of how this could affect the game environment and devaluing in-game purchases and all that other stuff, right? But as you saw with the 325A, not everything's available to just buy on the ship, right? So CIG can limit that. And then, of course, get military components are much more, since obviously it exists on the Buccaneer and it exists on the L-22 Wolf and a few other select ships, right? It's the Slipstream on the Talon and the Ghost, for example, right? There's a lot of examples of ships that have come stock with Class A components. So if CIG wants to, prevent people from doing that, then they would have to, remove that stuff from the stock loadout of the ship, right? Thus making players have to go and do the contested zones and stuff like that in order to get the stuff, right? Because as long as there's ways for me to bypass things, then I will, right? And I'm pretty sure a lot of other players think and feel the same way when it comes to this topic, right? And I've always said this, right? If a player can do it, they will. Well, again, there's only a few key components that you need, and if the only thing you really need out of the contested zones are neutrons, then that's all she fucking wrote, brother, right? So again, it's however they want to do it. They used to sell the old N13 and N14 neutron cannons. I owned all those weapons in the past, and when they took those away, I was super sad. And those weapons that I owned back then are now considered rewards for completing Obituary, for example, right? You know, the neutrons used to be some of the best fucking cannons in the game. So, you know, it made sense to take it off the store and make it an in-game item. But it doesn't make sense to take, you know, bullshit components and bullshit fucking weapons that you can buy at Center Mass at Area 18, right? You know, why the fuck should I be fucking tortured by, you know, having to have these dog shit N7As on my ship, right? And why should I even feel like that? Why doesn't the M7A actually fucking perform like it used to in the past, right? So again, there's so many things that they need to do, you know, ethics wise, as a company, to, you know, stop this nonsense. And there's obviously a path forward for CIG to maximize on cosmetic and loadout sales on the storefront without jeopardizing the value of the gameplay we already have, which is Hathor and, you know, contested zones and some of this new Vandal content out here in Nyx, right? So you just don't sell everything on the store, right? You know, I can understand when it comes to certain, you know, holes in, like ship chassis and stuff, right? But I don't get it when it comes to basic weapon loadouts and basic component configurations on these ships. It also is a plus for convenience, right? It saves people the time from having to actually warp around the game to find all this stuff, and they can just come here at the store and, you know, spend, you know, $10-$20 and have everything they want. So that way, every time a patch launches, right, you know, you don't open your Mobi-Glass and say, oh god damn it, like fucking 500 fucking AUEC of components just disappeared because CIG's fucking back end is just dog shit. Rah 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 rah, right? So there's so many things, so many problems that can be solved with what I'm, you know, suggesting right now. And y'all can debate it if you fucking want, right? You know, I've provided a solution, right? The only logical solution, in my opinion. Either you take them all off the fucking store, or you put them all in the store and you start letting people customize their ships with a customization menu and all that jazz, right? It'll just make the experience so much fucking better.